Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Uh, Welcome to today's Hack for NNP webinar on marine spatial planning for 30 by 30, from global priorities to country action. My name is Isidoro Hasbun. I'm Associate for Technical Assistance and Capacity Building at the High Ambition Coalition, and we're very grateful to all of you for joining us today, and especially to our speakers from National Geographic, Pristine Seas, Global Fishing Watch, United Kingdom, Crown Estate, and Mauritania. So today's, of course, discussions focus on marine spatial planning and how it can support the implementation of Target 3, how marine spatial planning can help connect global conservation priorities with national decision-making, data governance and implementation, and of course, being a High Ambition Coalition for Nature and People webinar, we want to make the connection practical for our members. So we're going to be hearing about priority setting, technical tools for data and monitoring, and national experiences from some of our member countries working through these issues in practice. So before we begin, as always, we have interpretation available. There is, again, also, before interpretation, update your Zoom name, include your organizational and or country affiliation. This session is being recorded and will be shared with participants afterwards. And yes, interpretation. So we're using AI interpretation. Hopefully it works well. We've had a few sessions, some bugs, but let's hope this one works properly. Interpretation is available in English, French, and Spanish. You click on the ellipsis. There's an icon, and there you can select the language output for your interpretation. We have a French speaker from Mauritania, Jibril, who will be speaking at the latter half of the session. So when they begin, I recommend clicking the English button for language or Spanish out button, where whichever language you feel most comfortable with for the output. So, and again, Q&A session. So raise your hands, mute yourself if you would like to have voice your comments or questions. So the agenda, we will begin after this from Enrique Sala, Executive Director of Pristine Seas. After that, we will turn to Charles Kilgore, Director of Program Initiatives at Global Fishing Watch. And then we will move to our country members. First, Ek McManus, Nature Portfolio Management Director at the Crown Estate. And then Jibril, Director of Coastal Protection at the Ministry of Environment of Mauritania, will share Mauritania's national implementation experience. And lastly, we have about 10 minutes for Q&A. So any questions, please reserve those for that space. And with that, I'm pleased to invite our first speaker, Enrique Sala, Executive Director of Pristine Seas, to begin. Enrique, over to you. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Isidoro, and hello, everyone. I was asked to talk about how to prioritize areas to protect in the ocean, the marine spatial planning. And I'd like to start by saying that there are many ways of doing that, right? The traditional way is to have consultations with users of the ocean, mostly with the fishing sector. But that alone is not optimal because fishers tend to agree to prioritize places where they don't fish, right? So many of these exercises have produced maps of areas for protection that are not fished. Therefore, marine protected areas will not deliver benefits if they are not abating a specific threat, right? So the consultations have always to be uh, accompanied with a more systematic effort using the best data available, which is a combination of scientific data and traditional knowledge. But today I'm going to show you an example of a prioritization framework that we developed that allows for any data layer that is available. And let me share my screen here. Okay, can you see the slide? Okay, so I'm going to share a framework that we developed in 2021 to solve a big issue that we had, which was that after countries had agreed that at least 30% of the global ocean should be protected, now some countries said, we're going to do it. We're going to do it before 2030. But other countries said, well, this is global ocean, right? We are not going to protect 30% because that would harm us. And that's based on a myth that we cannot protect more of the ocean because we need to catch more fish to feed more people. But that's the evidence actually shatters that myth, that assumption. Actually, we do know that protecting the right places can produce a spillover of fish that exceeds the foregone catch. Therefore, that would be a net increase in fisheries. And we have seen examples of this all over the world, from small species that move very little, like scallops, where a small protected no-take area in Fiji increased the catch several times around the protected area, to large species that migrate thousands of miles every year, like tuna across the Pacific, where the Papahānaumokuākea Marine National Monument and the Northwest Hawaiian Islands has produced such spillover of tuna that the US fleet is catching now 54% more yellowfin tuna around the protected area than before. And just this is near home. So lower costs, the same, more catch mean higher profits. So this is very important context to present to frame the discussion, because that's the major roadblock for protection. So if we want protected areas that are going to deliver benefits, additional benefits, greater benefit than what the ocean is producing now, we need to consider that protected areas shatter that assumption. And we published this framework in a study that I put together a team of 25 scientists and economists, and we published this in the journal Nature, of how to prioritize areas to protect for marine life, for food security, and for carbon storage, also for mitigation of climate change. And these were the results. We looked at several layers of biodiversity. We had divided the ocean in 150,000 pixels. Every pixel is half by half degree, or about 50 by 50 kilometers. And we compiled data globally for every pixel on what species live there, what the identity of a species, what the composition of the ecological community that lives in every pixel, what is the extinction risk for every one of these species, what is the phylogenetic diversity, meaning how diverse is the tree of life, the different branches of the tree of life in that place. Is there any ecological redundancy, meaning how many species of predators are in every pixel? So if one is depleted because of fishing, would the others pick up, etc. So we have several layers of biodiversity. And we ranked all of these pixels from pixel number one, top priority, meaning the pixel that, if fully protected from fishing, mining, drilling, and other activities, would deliver the greatest conservation gain, the greatest biodiversity gain, to the lowest priority, meaning an area that today is not touched by humans, low productivity, so there is no point in protecting it because we wouldn't get any benefit for protecting a place that is not threatened. So here is the map. The areas that are top priority are yellow and light green. And as you can see, most of the areas are in the near shore or around islands in the middle of the ocean. And for this map, in addition to having a map, we produced benefit curves, meaning that as we add pixels, right, as we increase the percentage of the ocean protected, we can measure how much biodiversity benefit we are getting. So the red line on top is for the global ocean, The blue is just for the exclusive economic zones, and the orange is for the high seas. As you can see, protecting areas in exclusive economic zones would give us greater biodiversity benefits than protecting areas in the high seas, because most of the biodiversity is in the EEZs, and also most of the threats are there. And as you can see, if we look at 0.3 right there, right, boom, we would achieve probably around 90% of the biodiversity benefits. And this prioritization framework is agnostic. It doesn't deal with a specific percentage, but the results show that the 30% will get us to protect much of the biodiversity gains. We'll do the same thing for food provisioning. Same thing, the light areas are areas where if they were fully protected, they would deliver a spillover of fish that exceeds the foregone catch. So they would give us a net gain in biomass of fish to catch. And we found that around 30% would give us 8 million tons of seafood more than what we're catching now. Same thing for carbon storage. These are the areas that are carbon rich sediments, the yellow and light green areas where there is bottom trawling that puts that carbon at risk. We found also that the carbon that is stored in the sediment, if it's disturbed by bottom trawling and it's disturbed, put in the water column in contact with oxygen instead of being buried in the sediment for millions of years, part of that carbon is remineralized, transforms into carbon dioxide. And we estimated that the carbon dioxide emissions from bottom trawling globally are on the scale of global aviation. So protecting those places where there is bottom trawling, where there are carbon-rich sediments, also would help us keep that carbon storage and mitigate global warming. As you can see, the three maps are different, right? If we care about biodiversity, these are the areas. If we care about fisheries only, the areas are different. If we care about carbon, the areas are different. So our model allows to optimize the three objectives. We can add more. We can add tourism use. We could add blue carbon from mangroves or salt marshes, for example. And we can optimize for the multiple objectives. Now, let's say that the world decides that we're going to give the same weight, the same importance to carbon storage, food provisioning, and marine life, which in turn produces many other benefits. This would be the map. This would be the areas, the top 50% areas in color that would optimize the three objectives. And to optimize the three objectives, we're talking about 45% of the global ocean, meaning that 30% is just it's a floor, not a ceiling. Now, this is the global picture, but you will be asking, what about my country? My country, no, every country is different. Every country will require a different percentage to achieve the same objectives. So this is just an example of how we have used this prioritization framework to do the marine spatial planning for a country. In this case, it's just an example of Papua New Guinea. You can see on the upper left is the map for biodiversity. Upper right is for carbon. Lower left is for food. And the lower right is if we give the same weight, the same importance to biodiversity, food, and carbon. So this is a tool that the countries can use to identify which are the key areas, the most important areas to protect in a way that doesn't create that arbitrary conflict between use, production and protection, but actually maximizes both benefits. And we have used this tool for helping set the priority areas for several countries in the Pacific already. And we do have the tool. We have the tool for every country in the world, for every exclusive economic zone. And from this, not only we can calculate the amount of carbon that would not be released, so the avoided carbon emissions, for which a country could sell as carbon credits. We not only can measure the gain in biodiversity, but also the gain in fisheries. And this is an example for countries in the Western Pacific, where we can estimate what is the area that would deliver the greatest net change in fisheries catch, right? And also what would be the biodiversity benefit. So we can produce this analysis, this result for every country. And we have a tool, online tool that we developed with Esri, the mapping platform that allows us to conduct this analysis immediately. We can obtain the biodiversity map, the carbon map, and the fisheries map for every country now. We can also obtain the map for the multiple objective optimization to optimize carbon, food, and biodiversity, giving it the same weight. But if a country decided that, oh, we are only interested in fisheries, we can do the analysis as well, right? We're just giving 100% of the weight, or 80%, or 60%, whatever the country wants. But one interesting thing that we found is that even globally, even if the world was not interested in biodiversity, if the countries of the world didn't care about all the benefits that biodiversity provides, except for fishing, right? If we only cared about fishing, the result, the model shows that we would protect, to maximize the effects of fisheries, we would protect 28% of the ocean. So, it's right there, 30%. That's the minimum to obtain, to even if we are just selfish thinking about food production, right? So again, all the science that we have re-emphasizes that 30% is a floor, not a ceiling. Although, as I mentioned, the percentage to be protected to obtain the benefits that the country desires will be dependent on that country's context. It will be different. But at Pristine Seas, we have this tool. We are using it with countries in the Pacific right now, and we would be delighted to be able to support other countries around the world on their marine spatial planning. Thank you for giving me the chance to present this, Isidoro and Rita.
Excellent, Enric. Fascinating tool and the multiple layers. I would also invite folks to look at the 2021 paper published in Nature as well and review it. It's a great piece, and it can inform as well do in practice specifically. So let me now invite Charles Kilgore, Director of Program Initiatives at Global Fishing Watch. Charles, over to you. And great to see you again.
Yeah, thanks, Isidore. Great to see you too. Thanks for the invite to come on here. I'm just trying to share screen now. This is the first one on this computer, so bear me a second. Can you see that? Is that working? Right.
Yeah, perfect.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so I was talking a little about the technology and tools that we have to support, Target 3 implementation and marine spatial planning. So I cover the tools a little bit, but not get too deep into the sort of technical side, really, of the different data we have in it, but really talk about what really underpins it, because it's, the policies that go alongside it and how it's utilized is really critical to effectiveness. So this is not really a sort of a technical talk on the tools themselves, but really just going around that. There's a lot more information we can get from our website and elsewhere if you're interested in the platform and tools. So it really kicks off with, we can't really plan around what we can't see. There's been a huge improvements and changes in the what is visible and what is accessible in terms of activity on the and data in general linked to the ocean that supports decision making. And that continues, and really marine spatial planning does have really significant impacts on lots of different groups. And when data is restricted, that it really does limit those who can see it and their ability to be involved in that decision making process. So we need to think very carefully about how and why data is held back. Sometimes it's just been held back for a long time, and when you reassess that, you can kind of see how it can be made more available. And to see how that looks a little bit in practice, some of the policies linked to transparency do have a really big impact of what we can see. And this is what we can see publicly. Obviously, certain agencies might have more data than this, but that's often locked up and not accessible to everyone who wants to be involved in these decision-making processes. So, just looking at CMAR, which is really progressive in this space, the countries now, even the countries in these figures which are not sharing data yet, are working towards that. So there's a lot of movement, a lot of activity in making data public in this region, which is why I'm picking it as a great example. And from what we can see now, in the 4 countries that make up the core part of CMAR, in the Eastern Tropical Pacific, so a group of countries working together to protect a key sort of ocean corridor. We see 9 times more fishing activity. So specific thing about fishing activity, we see 9 times more across this area on the data shared by those countries in their VMS, their national monitoring systems, versus what we see publicly on the AIS. And when you look at the countries which are having actively sharing publicly that VMS data, we see 25 times more fishing activity through the availability of that data than just AIS on its own. And the countries which don't allow for at the moment don't allow for the VMS to be shared publicly, we're seeing 92 times more fishing activity on the AIS itself. And in this region, there's no requirements for vessels to use AIS. So this is obviously a very small, like a very underestimation of the actual fishing activity that will be occurring in those countries. So the policies that are set around data really has big impact on what we can see. So yeah, we have a few tools that can be to use to think about what's happening on the water and support the marine spatial planning process. Marine Manager is the key one that is focused on supporting these processes. Within that, we have vessel tracking data. So as I said before, for the automated identification system, the AIS, and also the vessel monitoring system, the VMS, we try and make visible all of the activity from essentially from industrial vessels and smaller where possible, on our map, and it's open accessible to all. So you can see the activity. And we also use artificial intelligence and machine learning to try and bring out of that huge data set some of the key insights. So where boats are fishing, where they're going to port, where they're transshipping and seeing other activities. And we're also now bringing in other data sets around oil and gas, wind farms, and other data that and shipping and that can help understand what's happening on the water and inform marine spatial planning. And where vessels aren't being publicly tracked, and the activities are not so visible through platforms like Global Fishing Watch, we're able to utilize some of the remote sensing data. So the key ones of these are the optical imagery. There's also radar images, so SAR, synthetic aperture radar, which is from satellites, and night lights, which is a satellite system that can pick up lights, bright lights on the water at nighttime. So across these different tools, there's within each category of imagery from satellites, there's different products from different organizations. Some are free to access, like the European Space Agency. Other ones have to be purchased. But with these, we're starting to get even a better picture of, a real, more accurate picture of what is really happening on the water, which fills in some of the gaps of the public vessel tracking exists right now. And at the moment, small scale fisheries is really one of the big gaps in the data that we have and is available to decision makers. And these are often some of the most, indigenous communities and small scale fishing communities are some of the most marginalized groups in marine spatial planning. And it's, without the data, these groups are easy to be overlooked, and their voice is never quite as strong as if they have good data to back up what they're saying is their critical areas on the water and what their needs are and their rights are. So we're exploring different data sources. So one at the moment we're exploring is planet data, which is high resolution imagery. We are trying to see if we can detect smaller vessels, but this really has to be done in a way that can be validated and in collaboration with these communities and groups. So the data can be ensured that it's representing them accurately and fairly. So that's the process we're doing at the moment. We're initially sort of trialing that in Senegal, and through an MPA designation process is ongoing there. And you can see here that you can in the right conditions, you can see smaller vessels through this data. So we're still testing this. It's not available on our map yet, but we're interested to understand different use cases. And ecological and environmental data, this is often the hardest data to come by. You can access sort of the remote sensed sort of global data sets around what's happening on the surface of the ocean, but it's what's underneath is difficult to get. I was lucky enough to be working in Tristan da Cunha when Prestige Sea's vessel came to do probably what would have taken us on the island years to collect in terms of the data with the proper boat and all the science equipment there. So things like that, collaborations, what governments are doing, governments supporting other governments, these are all absolutely critical, because without the environmental data, it's hard to understand where those threats from human activity are most needed to be protected and reduced. When you bring all this together, you start seeing a really complex picture on the ocean. So the more data you get, the more complex it gets. And you start seeing a picture for pretty overcrowded coastal waters. This was from a study our research team did recently, looking at different data, all the different data we have available. And this is the image of the North Sea in Europe, which, as you can see, is a very crowded space. And, as Enrique was saying, that the areas we need to really think about protecting are, within the EEZ and within coastal waters. And with the overcrowding, it's getting harder and harder to find spaces that haven't got some kind of conflict. So really trying to think about different methods, different opportunities there are to find routes through that to protect key areas. And it is where the data comes in, and that is where you really need this detailed picture of what's happening on the water. A very quick example, like this is in the Azores. So this is the new areas that are being brought in the Azores. And you can see here before it was implemented, and you can start seeing activity completely changing some of the key areas which are no take after it was implemented. But every decision you make on the water like this has a reaction, and the vessels that are fishing in there will be fishing somewhere else. So what we try and do is work with governments to understand and predict what that might be. So as we're moving into more crowded spaces, we have to really think about what the different decisions that are made on the water will maybe what down the line impacts that might have elsewhere, and really start and think about that in the whole, which is what marine spatial planning really comes into. So this is a wrap up, and I'm probably running over time slightly. So for us, it is really the work we're trying to do is really understand how transparency is supporting the marine spatial planning and Target 3 implementation. And it goes beyond just the design. This is about implementation as well. Without the transparency, without the information and data there, and the capacity to utilize it, it really isn't going to be an effective output, which ticks off not just the 30%, but the other goals around representativity and high biodiverse areas being protected that are in Target 3. And the technology is really only as good as data that underpins it. So, as I talked about, some of those policies that really underpin that, and ensuring that any data that's being used is done in a responsible way that is in collaboration and working directly with the different groups that it impacts or is representing. And the ecological data is always difficult. That's not an easy one that you can't solve from satellites. That is something that you have to really get. It involves boats and lots of different departments and governments and support from partners. So that's a key one that we want to try and support, how that data then gets utilized to make it the most effective while working alongside the human activity data. And the point about OCMs, I think, is very coming to the fore more and more as different governments are looking for different ways to meet the 30% target and also the other policy goals that they have in the coastal space. So I'll leave it there. And back to you, Isadora, and look forward to any questions later.
Wonderful, Charlie. That's excellent, and shows the vital role of transparency and the incorporation of these various new technological systems and tracking vessel. Now, and again, I'm seeing some activity in the chat. Again, feel free to ask questions, and speakers as well, if you can answer synchronously. That's also great. Keep the conversation going. So now we will move. Charlie, if you can stop sharing, that would be great. And we'll move now to our first the country experiences. And I'm pleased to invite Ed McManus, Nature Portfolio Management Director at the Crown Estate, to share perspectives from the United Kingdom. Ed.
Brilliant. Thank you, Historic. First of all, can I ask you? Can you hear a fan in the background?
No.
Good.
You're
okay.
Good.
Right. I'm calling from the UK, but it's absolutely roasting here, so I'm gonna keep that on. That's great to hear.
You're good.
And just while I bring it up, it's like we practice this, and rate Charlie, because I think my talk just runs on immediately, perfectly afterwards. Okay. Choose what you'd like to share that with. Microsoft Edge tab. Yes, could be me. No. Oh gosh, window. Gotcha. Okay. Bear with everybody. Okay. Okay. Can everybody see that?
Yes, but yes, we can see now, of course, the presentation view.
Okay. Is that good?
Yes, excellent.
Brilliant. Thank you. Okay, so good morning, good afternoon, and I believe we can even do a good evening as well. So thank you so much. I'm really excited to talk with you here about the Crown Estate's nature recovery ambition. I'm going to try and tie that in, as the other really excellent speakers have done, to the 30 by 30 target as well. So I'm going to cover 4 areas as we're kind of one of the case studies. I'm talking from a position of the Crown Estate, and I'm guessing many of you may not, well, depending where we're all listening from, many of you may not be very familiar with the Crown Estate. So I'll just cover that off quickly. Then I'm going to talk to you briefly about some of our key spatial planning tools and our evidence base as well, and a little bit of a look forward to the future. So the Crown Estate, just really quickly, just to be clear, we're not actually part of the UK government. So we don't hold any statutory obligations like many of the other agencies will do. But we do have a remit to steward nature. So we're unique in many ways. We're an independent business. We straddle across the public and private sectors, and our origins can be found all the way back to so I think it's about late 1700s, so 1770 with I think it's George III. So I obviously wasn't working there then, but was just to say we're a venerable institution that way. So we essentially own and manage the whole of the seabed out to the 12 nautical mile territorial limit, and half the foreshore around England, Wales, and Northern Ireland. Really simply, what we do is we lease and license sector activities for offshore wind and several others, and I'll come back to that. And whilst we do that, we're able now to put nature recovery right at the centre of all of our decision making. So a couple of key publications from us to sort of really set the stalls out for who we are and what we do for nature is our January 2025 Nature Recovery Ambition. And basically we set out three goals for the whole organisation, and that's about delivering increased biodiversity on our jurisdiction, as set out just in those bullets. Then also there's a goal on water quality, essentially, and also linking well-being with nature. And to take this a step further, in January this year, we published our nature principles, which, again, we've set out. And in short, they're about unlocking space for nature. And we have associated KPIs, indicators for those. So, for example, doubling the area leased for nature by 2030 from a 2025 baseline. And then we have the second principle here is about protecting vulnerable habitats and species. And this is, as it says here, about directing infrastructure development away from sensitive and vulnerable habitats. And then we have making sure that we deliver positive outcomes for nature and people. And we become increasingly more and more aware, and all of us in the students community, I know we're embracing this, making sure that we link human well-being to nature and to yes, okay. And then Finally, we have our principle here on promoting sustainable investment in nature, and we're developing a natural capital markets toolkit here to, again, propel this fourth principle further. So, thank you, Charlie. You set me up perfectly. We did, by the way, everybody, we didn't practice this, but Charlie put up a really excellent picture there of the North Sea, saying how busy it is. So I'll come to the sectors we cover, but this diagram shows essentially the potential area of opportunity. So the PAO, the potential area of opportunity for all of the sectors, like offshore wind, carbon capture storage, etc. And that this propels us off into the future. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is the seabed is a busy space. So we need tools to manage that. So here at the Crown State, we are in development of our marine delivery route map. And I'm not going to go through all of this, but essentially what it does, it allows us to say where and when we can secure the best outcomes for the economy, society, and the environment. And essentially what it contains is a lot of very highly resolved information on the seabed for different uses. So this is essentially our strategic delivery plan for the seabed, and we have this projections off into 2050. So every good plan needs a good evidence base. So we have our whole of seabed evidence base, and this underpins the marine delivery route map, and I'll refer to that now as the MDR. And the whole of seabed, the spatial database, it has information in 10 sectors. So if you run your eyes along the bottom here, we have aggregates, carbon capture storage, electricity cables, interconnectors for all that electricity whizzing around. Then we have nature, and that's why we're here. Offshore wind, telecom cables, and tidal range and stream. And then what we have, I colloquially here in the UK call this the center diagram here, the onion diagram. And this simply just represents an analytical process. So let's take offshore wind. Offshore wind, we understand that it requires certain parameters like water depth, etc. So that draws out a certain area of the seabed, and then it slowly refines that area of search further and further until we have a potential area of opportunity. So there are barriers, there might be other infrastructure there, other interests like Ministry of Defence, whatever, and then we can run various scenarios. So this is a representation of our nature potential area of opportunity, and it holds, this is some of the data we have, yeah, some of the data that we have. But if you look over onto the legend here on the left-hand side, you can see some of the data sets which have been grouped. So, for example, habitat potential, we have information there on seagrass, salt marsh, kelp, etc. Valuable benthic habitats, those in existence but hard to replace, etc. Mobile species, seabirds, sea mammals, and then we have the MPA network, including the condition, so favorable, unfavorable, etc. So, phenomenal tool. I love it. I was really excited to come to the Crown Estate and start using the data. However, what I'm unable to do is point at one part of the seabed and easily count up the number of opportunities for nature. So roll on to our strategic opportunities map. So just to let you know, this is not everything else I've described is available, and you can start seeing mock-ups, etc., of different scenarios. However, the strategic opportunities map is currently in development to be delivered this year in collaboration with the government and other NGOs. But just at a high level, I'm just going to run you through the definition and methodology. So essentially, it's as the tagline here says, we know nature is everywhere, but there are areas which give us greater potential. And so the map itself provides, for the first time for us, a comprehensive understanding of the value of the seabed, and also where any restoration may occur to what extent that might endure, and I'll explain that a little bit further. So the first time we'll also then be able to link nature and human well-being as a parameter to guide our decision making into the future. So it's an evolution of the information I was showing before, and it's still embedded within our marine delivery route map. But for us, it's a step change, and I think for many users, it will be a step change because it tells us where's the greatest number of opportunities and where is those opportunities likely to be realised and endure. And then it enables us to work with our partners within the UK government and also Wales and Northern Ireland, the key agencies and government departments, to support delivering key national and international targets, and principally, obviously, 30 by 30, and allows us then to prioritise for human wellbeing in communities as well. So what does it measure? We've got ecological importance, so where important habitats and species already exist, climate refugia, and then really simply put, we have two grouped layers. The first one is opportunity for improvement. So that's restoration potential, as mentioned, restoration potential for salt marsh, seagrass, etc. Human well-being, etc., and also connectedness. So how connected we can grab indices connectedness for humans and nature. And then we have that group, and then we have a grouping of pressures. We bring in information of different types of pressures, or different types of pollutions, invasives, plastics. You'll all be familiar with those, and also looking at climate change. Where will that, if that area will be good for a specific habitat in 10, 15, 20 years' time. And then essentially, this is my last slide, you'll be glad to hear. So essentially the output there for this map, and I don't have a map to show you at this point in time, so it's under development. The output will just be a readout of where areas of the seabed and coast have high opportunities and then low pressures. And then that for us is a high priority because we can then use that to target natural capital markets and protection. And again, that feeds therefore back into 30 by 30. And I'll just leave you, I'm very happy to put these in the chat if anybody's interested, so I can give you more information about the Crown Estate Marine Delivery Route Map. We have an absolutely awesome document here, the Nature Technical Note, which lists all the data that we have, references where to get it, etc., and the format. And if I may just finally do a plug for the Marine Climate Change Impacts Partnership here in the UK, cross-government, cross-agency, and they've just recently published the Climate Smart Marine Spatial Planning, which provides route maps for spatial planning, keeping in mind climate change, and it's for the overseas territories, but the approach is applicable in many other parts of the world. So I'll stop sharing. Thank you very much for your attention, and I've really enjoyed talking with you. Okay.
Thank you so much, Ed, and really interesting to see the ambition of the Crown Estate in these efforts. And again, looking forward to the conversation once we get into the Q&A from everyone in the audience. So now we will turn to Jibril Lee, Director of Coastal Protection at the Ministry of Environment of Mauritania, to share reflections on national implementation. Jibril?
Yes. Bonjour, Isidore. Good morning, everyone.
Hello.
Hi there.
Okay. It's okay?
Perfect. And for folks, if you do not speak French, I recommend turning to interpretation on, again, ellipsis, click English or Spanish. if you would like to listen to the presentation. Jibril, the floor is yours. Just wanted to clarify that.
Merci. Merci beaucoup, Isidore. Bonjour à tous. Donc, je m'en vais présenter l'expérience de la Mauritanie en termes de planification spatiale marine. Donc, quand vous m'avez demandé de faire une présentation sur le processus en Mauritanie, donc je me suis un peu posé la question, est-ce que dois-je faire cette présentation puisqu'on est encore dans un processus qui n'est pas encore abouti? Euh, dans tous les cas, je vais quand même vous présenter quelques éléments qui vous permettront en tout cas de vous mettre dans un
Since we're
contexte
still in a
plus
process that
intéressant
hasn't yet been completed in all cases,
Next.
I'm nevertheless going to present a few elements that will, in any case, put you in a rather interesting context
La
about the
présentation
Mauritanian
se
camp.
structure en trois
Next.
points. D'abord, je vais présenter une
So the
brève
presentation is structured
description
around
de la
3
zone côtière
points.
et marine mauritanienne.
First, I'd
En
like to
deuxième
present a
point,
basic
je
idea,
vais
one of
vous
Mauritania's
présenter
coastal
la
and
nouvelle
marine
stratégie
zones.
des aires marines protégées,
Second point,
avec bien entendu un focus sur le
I'm
GBF
going to present the new
Kunming-Montréal
protected
drop-off
area
dans le cadre
strategy.
mondial post-2020. Et en troisième point, sur la stratégie de la
With, of course, a
planification
focus on the
spatiale marine.
JBF Kunming-Montreal Treaty in the
Pour la
post-2020 global
description
setting.
de la zone
And
côtière
thirdly,
mauritanienne,
on
pour ceux qui
marine
ne le connaissent
spatial
pas,
planning strategy.
la
So,
Mauritanie, c'est un pays
for the
avec une
description of the
façade
Mauritanian coastal
maritime
zone for
de
those who don't know it,
757 km,
Mauritania
avec une zone économique exclusive de 234 000 km² de ZEE. Et c'est une zone qui est connue par sa richesse, notamment marin et côtier, avec des remontées d'eau froide qu'on appelle communément le pooling, mais aussi des apports éoliens de sels minéraux venant du Sahara. Et tout ceci amène à constituer la Mauritanie une zone d'habitat singulier, puisqu'on retrouve des herbiers marins, des vasières, des récifs coralliens les plus importants de la côte ouest africaine, des mangroves, des monts sous-marins, entre autres habitats spécifiques.
is a country with a coastline of 754 kilometers, an exclusive economic zone of 234,000 square kilometers, and a zone known for its richness, notably in marshes and kochar, with upwelling of cold water commonly known as the pointy, but also aeolian contributions of mineral salts coming from that. And all this makes Mauritania a zone of singular habitat, with seagrass and mudflats, the most important coral reefs on the West African coast, mangroves, seamounts, and other specific habitats. So this is a mosaic that gives you an idea of our diversity, coaching, and seafaring. When you look at the map of it's like you have a desert. Everything's flat. On the other hand, when you zoom in, you'll see that there are lagoons and bays, including the largest bay in Mauritania, a grass vasiary complex, the most important of which are the cliffs, which constitute specific habitats for certain ecosystems and bird species. We have a dozen or so islands and islets on the Pandergain, particularly on top of the Pandergain, a seagrass complex covering more than 1,000 square kilometers. The most important even in the west, estuaries, capricures, and dunes that can reach up to 6 meters in height. So all this gives you a bit of a mosaic of the different ecosystems and habitats found in Mauritania's coastal zone. Whereas when you look at the map, you get the impression that we're in a desert environment. So one image I usually show is this one. This is a Google Earth image showing the winds of the Sahara blowing from the continent to the sea. As it happens, one of the riches of the Mauritanian zones is part of the Oronian supplements. Saharan winds are rich in nutrients. These enormous quantities of winds blowing out to sea are deposited on the seabed. And at the bottom of the water, there are microorganisms that find mineral salts to feed on, and this, by the upwelling effect, helps to enrich Mauritania's waters, and this is constitutionally important.
La profondeur vers la surface, et ceci constitue un élément fondamental qui explique la richesse des eaux économiques des eaux
The
mauritaniennes.
permanent phenomenon found in the north of Mauritania's economic zone is a permanent phenomenon that causes mineral salts in water to flow from depth to surface. And this is a fundamental element that explains the richness of Mauritania's economic waters in terms of haleutic resources. So, in terms of numbers, as I mentioned earlier, there are 234,000 square kilometers of exclusive economic zone. We currently have 4 marine protected areas of international importance. Over 500 species of fish, ranging from pelagic to benthic. 49 are on Lucien's red list. We also have around 30 species of whale and doffer, sea turtles too, one of the most important being the green turtle, and something over 260, nearly 270 species of coached birds that stay for a while in any case. In coastal Moyatan sites. So all of this brings us back to this biodiversity. By compiling, we find the different strata of the tel agic, from the versal to the benthic. The tonnage is truly extraordinary, at least in terms of pre-harvesting. Total allowable catches.
Et ceci est extrêmement important dans le cadre d'une planification spatiale marine, compte tenu du fait que il y a plusieurs autres enjeux.
So it's the total allowable catch. So it's the total allowable catch. So it's the total allowable catch. And this is extremely important for marine spatial planning, given that there are many other issues surrounding these biodiversity zones. So, in a nutshell, this mock-up presents the different activities found in the exclusive economic zone, ahead of fishing, mining, and tourism, energy, transport, and urban planning, digital activity, of course, and protected areas. So all this is a little, how shall I say,
les enjeux de la conservation soient en tout cas conciliés aux enjeux justement de l'économie. Et cette carte à droite vous montre un peu les différentes couches que nous avons superposées allant des sites de biodiversité, notamment au niveau de la zone de Nouadhibou au nord, où on retrouve clairement le parc national du Bandarguin. Autour de cela, nous avons la zone qui se trouve, le grand cercle en bleu, c'est la zone de l'upwelling permanent, un ensemble de canyons sous-marins.
And this map, on the right, shows you the different layers we've superimposed from biodiversity sites to the water zone to the north, where we clearly find the Parc National du around this. The large blue circle is the permanent zone, a series of canyons. We also have the largest Quarnier Reef in Mauritania, measuring 450 kilometers long, except for the Off-Road Canyon, and a range of other activities, including the GTA gas fields and oil fields currently under exploration. So there you have it, a whole range of activities, pressure, in this exclusive economic zone. So all this is to say that we're in a pressure zone, a contact zone between conservation and development, which ultimately calls for better marine spatial planning. So, in this strategic configuration, we are in the process of finalizing our first strategic document, which is the National Protected Strategy. So this national strategy focuses on 4 priority states. The first is to identify these areas of ecological and biological interest, what we call IEPs, or zones of biological interest.
En troisième lieu, que cette stratégie soit reconnue au niveau régional et international. Is
to bring these strategies to the level of important political support so that they are adopted and that this network is clearly recognized by the various sectors. Thirdly, this strategy must be recognized at regional and international level. Find sustainable funding mechanisms to support the management and conservation of these marine protected areas. And finally, set ourselves the goal of having a network in a sustainable Mauritanian country.
Les AMP existants en vert et les AMP en cours de création et d'identification.
Which is financially supported and maintained with technical resources and tools that are fully recognized on a global scale. So this map shows you a little of the existing ANP in in green, and the ANP in the process of being created and certified. So HER takes into account all types of underwater biodiversity, canyons and well sea areas and mangroves too. This figure shows where we are in relation to these objectives. And you can see, in light green, it's the different ALP that are officially recognized, with their own level of marine coverage. The other protected areas identified in the zones of ecological interest that have been identified and are in the process of being classified. And other protected areas that are areas of ecological interest, but which still need to be negotiated. Complementary, so that it can in any case be registered as a recognized ANP at national level. And so,
vont bientôt atteindre vers les 12% de la ZEE mauritanienne, donc 12% de la zone économique exclusive mauritanienne.
This map gives you a more precise idea of the ARP, which have been identified in the new strategy and which are in terms of coverage. Will soon reach around 12% of Mauritania's ZE, 12% of Mauritania's exclusive economic zone. In other words, we're on a path. We've already passed the target, but we don't talk about it much, because it hasn't yet been reached for the right number of countries. But we're also on course to reach the 30 target for Montreal, and we hope to make good progress in any case. So, talking about marine spatial planning strategy, in Mauritania, this process is still under consideration. We're still thinking about it. These things are not yet clearly identified. We do, however, have a whole institutional arsenal of legal and strategic measures in place to help push forward the future Russian marine spatial planning strategy. We were able to update the National Biodiversity Strategy, so 2022-2030. So it's an important strategy in the context of our commitments to the CBD Convention. That was in 2024. In 2025, the majority are among the first African countries to have ratified the 13 GBPNJ, which is also an important element in achieving the 130 goals. In 2025, we also updated our master plan for the development of the Majoritan coastline. In 2026, so in 2026, Mauritania adopted a new law on morality. The new national strategy for marine protected areas. So all these elements will, I hope, lead to a new national strategy. The marine space, which for me, it's the logical culmination of everything we've been able to do upstream in terms of mapping and concerted arbitration of the various uses, fishing, energy, offshore conservation, all with a view to achieving a sustainable blue economy.
Qui avait pour objectif de créer une ANP transfrontalière autour du GTA. Donc là, vous voyez la carte un peu en bas au sud, là où il y a l'encadré en rouge, c'est la zone des GTA. GTA, c'est la plateforme gazière d'exploitation transfrontalière entre la Mauritanie et le Sénégal. Et le Birala, c'est une autre zone d'exploration aussi du pétrole. Donc tout ceci, nous aimerions créer des AMSES, donc des autres mesures de conservation par zone.
And just recently, last April, for those of you who were there, we held discussions with our Senegalese neighbors on the creation of a cross-border AIP around the GTA. We held a bilateral meeting, the aim of which was to create a cross-border ALP around the GTA. So you can see the map a little way down in the south, where there's a box in red. That's the GTA zone, the cross-border gas export platform between Mauritania and Senegal. And this is another, shall we say, oil exploration zone. All this, we'd like to create seas souls, so other conservation measures by zone, where we plan to extend coverage to coastal and marine areas in the ZE and with our Senegalese neighbors. We're in fairly fruitful discussions to achieve this objective of creating a cross-border AIP that will connect habitats that are not yet connected. which are not only at the Mauritanian level, but which transcend the limits of Mauritanian territory as far as Senegal. We therefore have the opportunity to work together to achieve this objective. All this is part of a dynamic of better marine spatial planning, and I hope that by the year 2007, we'll be able to make significant progress in this area and make a significant contribution to national and international policies. Thank you very much.
Excellente présentation, Djibril. Très bonne parole de l'expérience de Mauritanie. Et ce sera intéressant de voir si une stratégie nationale plus concrète. So let's,
Mauritania's experience, and it will be
Let's
interesting
see,
to see if a more concrete national strategy can be developed.
let's go on to the Q&A now, everyone. We have, here you go. Let's see. Let's put the full screen. Okay. Let's go 10 minutes. I know we are extending time, but we have time for about 2, maybe 3 questions at most for our guest speakers today. Thanks for the understanding, everyone. So let's open up the floor. Any questions that ACT members and participants have related to the conversations today? Yes, Demoina.
Thank you so much for the presentations. It was really excellent. And one of the common points that I've seen through the different presentations is the importance of having multiple angles and working across sectors, that it's not just about biodiversity, it's also about food, climate change, and also we know that security is something that is quite important also for many countries. And maybe if and maybe I can turn to Djibril and Ed, but also keen on hearing the experience of Enrique and Charlie in terms of the process of bringing all the stakeholders at the same table, because we have the data, we know where we should protect, but it's about competing interests and sometimes very hard to get people agree, even if we have the best science and data. So if you all can speak very briefly on that point. Thank you so much.
I'm happy to go first. Is it Doro, if that helps, from the UK perspective?
Yes.
Yeah. No, thanks, Demonia. Just I want to make sure I pronounce your name correctly. Demonia? I'll do. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, thank you, Demonia. Yes, thanks.
Demonia. Thank you so much. Sorry, I don't want to be impolite. Yeah. So there's a couple of points I'd take from that. It's at the Kronostate, we work with many different sectors, but as you probably may have noticed at the bottom of that, those 10 sectors doesn't include fisheries, it doesn't include oil and gas. So we have to collectively bring all of ourselves together to make sure we have all the information that we require to make sure that when we start those discussions, we're able to sort of plan ahead and know where everybody's expectations are for seabed usage up until, for example, 2050. But what I've been really impressed about at the Kronostate is, for us, it's not even just about accepting a data set. So, for example, when I think about seabirds, we may receive a data set on where seabirds are and foraging areas, etc. But then we work closely with the relevant ENGOs like the RSPB here and BTO. And then we further refine those data sets and get expert understanding about how seasonally some of those static looking layers may change. So for me, it's not only you get the best data in, you get expert refinement, and then you can get everybody around the table and do that sort of forward planning. So that would be my take.
Moina, happy to answer the second part of the question, how to bring stakeholders around the table. And first of all, we don't protect places, countries do, right? Governments do. So it is the governments who inform the process with scientific information, economic analysis, also with our media to inspire. It's not only about the data, it's not only about the stuff for the brain, but also to develop an emotional connection with those places. And because that's absolutely necessary. You can have all of the data in the world and bring all the stakeholders around the table, but if those people are not inspired, if the people who make decisions don't have that emotional connection, don't love that place, it's going to take much longer or be very, very difficult. And nothing beats taking the decision makers to the water with us. We've taken people on our submersible, presidents, prime ministers, ministers, and they come out of the water crying, saying, "I had no idea we had this." Right? So that's very important, and this is not something that shows up in the marine spatial planning, but the human factor is absolutely a sine qua non. And then it is the countries that have to do that exercise, and we support them. For example, I just came back from Papua New Guinea, where the government announced the imminent creation of a 200,000 square kilometer no-take area in the Western Manus province, in the western side of the country. And it is the Ministry of Fisheries that is the leader on that, right? It is the Minister of Fisheries that you would expect in most other countries to oppose any protection. In this case, they realized the value of, based on the science, they realized the value of the protected areas for their food security and their economic revenue. So that makes it much easier, right? Than if it's just the Minister of the Environment trying to convince the Minister of Fisheries, which usually it's a losing proposition. So having that awareness and that outreach at the government level first, to make sure that all of the key stakeholders in government understand the benefits and that they don't succumb to the myths, right? That's very important.
Yeah, I can just very quickly add that. Yeah, the key thing we try and do is create this common picture as well. So when the conflicts that will come up in these processes often are much older than the process, and if you can try and bring into the process, that there is a solution to some of these long-standing conflicts and challenges, and that if one group's data they find is being used against them historically, like that, they're very often quite concerned about providing more information or engaging these processes. So it's really about that participation is not, it can't just be on paper. It really has to be truly a part of it, and that goes with the weight given to the data that is representing different groups is given similar weight, even if it's coming from different sources. So if it's traditional knowledge or versus hard data from logbooks and things like this, from different groups of fisheries, if one has more weight to it, then the process falls down. So it's really thinking about how you present that data and how you utilize it in the process, and make everyone feel that passion for it, because they've all got passion for their own areas, and they might not see it from other perspectives. And when you have that common picture, it really helps.
Thank you, Charlie. Let's go. We have one last question, and I think we have to close the session because of time. So, Cynthia, yes.
Thank you, Isidore.
Yes.
And thank you to all of our wonderful speakers. Many countries are trying to bring these different elements together through marine spatial planning and broader sustainable ocean plans. All of the speakers mentioned or highlighted the importance of better data, transparency, and prioritization tools to support the 30x30 implementation. But many countries are still facing institutional, financial, and capacity constraints. So how can we ensure that these tools do not remain technical exercises, but actually inform national planning, political decisions, and investment pathways? That's what I keep going back to. Thank you.
Well, I'll go first. Cintia, hola, ¿cómo estás? One reason why we wanted to prioritize multiple objectives was to make sure that the exercise was not another academic exercise published in a scientific journal and shelved like many others. So we wanted to make sure that that multi-dimensional analysis, like Ed has shown, breaks the roadblocks, breaks the walls in between silos, in between user groups. And actually, we are using it, as I mentioned, in our work with Pacific countries, and we have established partnerships to support the countries. Right, the countries may have limited capacity, but in this case, for example, in the Pacific, we are partnering with several donors, including the Bezos Earth Fund, and they provide funds for implementation for the governments to be able to implement the marine spatial plans and the protected areas. So from the onset, what we're trying to do is, when we work with a country, is make sure that there's going to be some financial support for implementation and even longer term. So putting together a collective of funders or people who are going to help develop the sustainable financing strategy, plus also support with monitoring. So I'm on the board of Global Fishing Watch since the beginning, and so we have this wonderful, very strong partnership where Global Fishing Watch also helps support the monitoring. So that in-kind support and the financial support from donors goes a long way and facilitates and removes many of those issues.
Yeah, I'm happy to go now. That's good. Is Dora? Yep. So I'd say we're kind of protection in action already at the Crown Estates. As I mentioned, we have now our nature principles, and those guide all of our decision-making processes. So as I mentioned, we have protect, and what we do is when we run scenarios for build out of offshore infrastructure, that second principle by protection guides us to make offshore infrastructure development avoid sensitive, protected, vulnerable habitats and species. We're in the midst of doing that, and it also then helps us to work with other agencies, as we're already doing this, working with the NGOs, other government departments who want to restore and use natural solutions to issues in the coastal and marine environment. So we're already in action doing that. But if I may again, then the strategic opportunities map, which is it's a really good point about the investment and the funding of all of these initiatives, because the strategic opportunities map allows us to pinpoint the seabed and say, look, there's so many opportunities there that presents an amazing opportunity for some investors, for whatever reason that might be, for corporate responsibility, or for the other options they may wish to, for biodiversity net gain, etc. It allows us to help them target where they want to invest. So that's kind of the next step for us. But it's an excellent question. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Ed. And yes, Charlie, the last response, because we have to end the session.
I don't have to, but yeah, it's very quick. I second the partnerships, and just one thing is, when we engage with governments, we often have entry points could be around monitoring, control, and surveillance and supporting that, or it could be, firstly, with supporting 30x30 implementation. So whichever entry point we go with, we try and transition through to the other part, because you have to work and bring different agencies together to try and work together. And that's the key point. That's often the big bit that's missing, is that interagency cooperation, even within governments, and then transboundary as well.
Thank you, Charlie. So with that, again, thank you to all the participants and, of course, our wonderful speakers. It's always a great sign that the conversation I should have made the session 2 hours instead of an hour and 15 or an hour. So, it's a really important topic. So again, thanks to Enrique Sala from Pristine Seas, Charles Kilgore, Global Fishing Watch, Edward Magnus, Crown Estate, and Jibril Lee from the Ministry of Environment of Mauritania. And a couple of housekeeping before we end. We have June 1st, capacity building on advanced training, conservation effectiveness session. This is going to be a really interesting conversation with the IUCN, WCPA working group on conservation effectiveness. We have another webinar on ecosystem services. And then in July, we'll have the next IPLC task force, among other things related to capacity building. So with that, let me end the call today, and thank you all so much for joining, and hope to see you again in another Hack Capacity Building session. Bye-bye.